I stared at the ceiling of the pre-op room, trying to focus on anything except the conversation happening near my bed. The antiseptic smell burned my nostrils as I listened to my parents explain to the nurse why they couldn't stay for my surgery. "She'll be fine alone," Mom said, adjusting her designer beach cover-up. "We have a party to host at our beach house. All our friends are expecting us. It's just a routine procedure," Dad added, checking his Rolex. She's being dramatic about needing support. 24 years old and still wanting Mommy to hold her hand. The nurse, Sarah, looked between them and me, her expression carefully neutral. "Dr. and Dr. Thompson," as I explained, "while the surgery is considered routine, all procedures carry risks. Most families prefer to—" "We're both surgeons," Mom cut her off. "We understand the risks better than anyone. Now if you'll excuse us, we have a 2-hour drive ahead." I watched them gather their things, neither looking in my direction. The beach party had been planned for months, a celebration of their 20th anniversary as leading surgeons at Metropolitan General. All their colleagues would be there, drinking expensive champagne and sharing stories about their most impressive procedures. "Amanda, stop with the sad eyes." Dad sighed. "You're not a child anymore. Focus on getting better, and maybe next time you'll be invited to these professional gatherings." Mom smoothed her silk blouse. "If you'd followed our path into surgery, instead of choosing pediatric nursing, you'd understand the importance of maintaining professional connections." The words stung, but I kept my face carefully blank. 3 years of working in pediatric intensive care had taught me how to maintain composure in difficult moments. I'd learned to stay calm when parents received devastating news, when children faced painful procedures, when families fell apart under the strain of illness. "Your surgery is scheduled for 3 p.m., Mom continued, typing on her phone. "We'll check in tomorrow when we're back in town. Try not to bother the nurses too much. They have real emergencies to deal with." Sarah, the nurse, stepped forward. "Actually, Dr. Thompson, I need you to sign these consent forms before you leave, since Amanda's procedure involves—" Yes. Dad waved his hand impatiently. "We know the protocol." He scribbled his signature without reading the documents. "There, now we really must go." They swept out of the room without a backward glance, their footsteps echoing down the corridor. I heard Mom's laugh fade away as they headed toward the elevator. Sarah squeezed my hand gently. "I'm so sorry, Amanda. Would you like me to call someone else for you?" I shook my head. "No need. I'm used to handling things alone." She checked my IV and vital signs, her movements efficient but kind. "Well, you're not alone here. The surgical team will take excellent care of you." I smiled at her, appreciating her attempt at comfort. If only she knew the full story. If only my parents knew who would be reviewing their cases tomorrow morning. The hours passed slowly. I dozed fitfully, interrupted by nurses checking my vitals and updating my charts. My phone buzzed occasionally with photos from the beach party. My parents had been tagged in dozens of posts showing laughing doctors raising glasses of champagne, group shots on the pristine beach, elegant table settings on the deck of their vacation home. At 2:45 p.m., the transport team arrived to take me to surgery. As they wheeled me down the hallway, I caught glimpses of the familiar hospital corridors from this new angle. How strange to be the patient instead of the caregiver. "Doing okay?" one of the transport techs asked kindly. "Yes," I replied softly, "just ready to get this over with." The operating room lights were bright as they transferred me to the surgical table. The anesthesiologist introduced himself and began explaining the procedure. I nodded along, already familiar with the process from my years of medical experience. As the medications began flowing through my IV, my thoughts drifted to the meeting scheduled for tomorrow morning. The ethics board would be reviewing several cases, including some involving my parents. As chief of surgery, I had called the emergency session myself, though they didn't know that yet. The last thing I heard before drifting off was the anesthesiologist saying, "Count backward from 100. When I woke in recovery several hours later, my phone was lit up with missed calls from the hospital board. Tomorrow would bring some difficult conversations about professional ethics, family obligations, and the true meaning of patient care. But for now, I closed my eyes and let the pain medication carry me back to sleep. The beach party was still going strong, according to the latest social media updates. Let them enjoy their celebration. Morning would come soon enough. The morning after my surgery, I woke to the sound of urgent voices in the hospital corridor. Through my partially open door, I could hear the distinct clicks of my mother's heels, and my father's argumentative tone. "What do you mean emergency ethics board meeting? We have surgeries scheduled," Dad's voice carried down the hall. "Sir," the board chairman was very clear. "Your presence is required at 9 a.m. sharp," a hospital administrator explained. I glanced at the clock. 8:45 a.m., right on schedule. My parents had returned from their beach party to find multiple urgent messages from the hospital ethics board, the medical licensing committee, and the chief of surgery's office. Their phones had started buzzing at 7 a.m., with increasingly insistent demands for their immediate attendance. "This is ridiculous," Mom snapped. "We're senior surgeons. They can't just demand we." "Doctor and Dr. Thompson," a new voice interrupted. "Dr. Martinez, the ethics board secretary. The board is waiting. Please follow me." I could picture the conference room where they were heading. I'd spent enough time there over the past year, though they didn't know that. The large mahogany table, the stern faces of board members, the thick files of cases under review. My room's door opened, and Sarah, my nurse from yesterday, entered with a knowing smile. "How are you feeling this morning, Dr. Anderson?" I returned her smile, appreciating her deliberate use of my proper title. "Better, thank you. Has it started?" "Just about to," she replied, checking my vitals. "The entire ethics board is assembled. Dr. Martinez said she'd keep you updated." Meanwhile, my parents were discovering exactly why they'd been summoned. Through the hospital grapevine, which Sarah was expertly tapped into, I learned that they'd walked into the conference room with their usual air of authority, only to find themselves facing the entire ethics board and the hospital's legal team. "Doctors Thompson," the board chairman began, "we're here to discuss several serious ethical violations, including patient abandonment and breach of professional duty." "What are you talking about?" Dad demanded. "We haven't abandoned any patients. Yesterday afternoon, you left a patient undergoing major surgery without proper family support or adequate handoff procedures," the chairman continued. "This follows a pattern of behavior that has been documented over the past year." Mom's defensive voice carried through the gossip chain. "If this is about Amanda's procedure, that was routine. We're surgeons. We understand. Being surgeons should make you more aware of proper protocol, not less," interrupted Dr. Martinez. "But perhaps you should hear this from our chief of surgery." The door had opened then, and based on the sudden silence that followed, I could imagine their faces as they recognized the hospital's youngest ever chief of surgery, their daughter. Sarah returned to my room with a barely suppressed grin. "They just got to the part about who's been documenting their ethical violations for the past year." I nodded, maintaining my professional composure even as satisfaction coursed through me. For 12 months, I'd been quietly building a case file: patients left during critical care periods, rushed procedures to accommodate social events, dismissive treatment of nursing staff, and dozens of protocol violations that their status had previously protected them from. "The ethics board has reviewed extensive documentation," my voice would be saying in that conference room. "We have serious concerns about your commitment to patient care and professional standards." The next hour brought a steady stream of updates from various hospital staff. My parents' faces had gone from red with anger to pale with shock, as they realized the full scope of their situation. Their daughter, the one they'd dismissed as just a nurse, had not only become chief of surgery 6 months ago, but had been methodically documenting their ethical violations since taking the position. "Your medical licenses will be under review," I would have informed them. "In the meantime, your surgical privileges at this hospital are suspended pending completion of ethics training and a thorough evaluation of your commitment to patient care." Sarah returned one final time before her shift ended. "They're still in there," she reported, "but the board just voted unanimously to suspend their privileges." I nodded, feeling no satisfaction or joy, only a deep sense of professional duty fulfilled. This wasn't about revenge for years of dismissal or yesterday's abandonment. It was about upholding the standards of medical care that every patient deserved. "Should I send them in when they're finished?" Sarah asked. "They'll probably want to speak with you." "No," I replied calmly. "Tell them the chief of surgery will meet with them next week to discuss their path forward. For now I need to rest and recover." "Doctor's orders." Sarah smiled and nodded, understanding perfectly. As she left, I could hear my parents' voices in the hallway, subdued and shocked. The beach party seemed very far away now. I closed my eyes, knowing that difficult conversations lay ahead. But for the first time in my medical career, my parents would have to acknowledge me not as their disappointing daughter, who just worked in pediatrics, but as the chief of surgery who held their professional futures in her hands. Sometimes, the best treatment for chronic misbehavior was a strong dose of reality. The week following my surgery passed in a carefully orchestrated dance of avoidance. My parents made 3 attempts to visit my hospital room, but each time they were politely informed by staff that the chief of surgery was not accepting personal visitors during recovery. Professional boundaries must be maintained during an ongoing ethics review, the nurse would say, repeating the exact words I'd written in the protocol memo. I used the time to recover and review their case files from my hospital bed. The evidence was overwhelming: 37 documented incidents of patient care violations in the past year alone. Their beach party abandonment was just the final piece in a pattern that could no longer be ignored. On the morning of our scheduled meeting, I arrived early to my office, my surgical incisions still tender but healing well. Dr. Martinez had offered to reschedule, but I insisted on maintaining the timeline. Professional standards wait for no one. At exactly 9 a.m., my assistant announced their arrival. "Dr. and Dr. Thompson are here for their appointment, Chief." I took a moment to straighten my white coat, the chief of surgery badge gleaming under the office lights. "Send them in." They entered hesitantly, so different from their usual confident stride. Mom's designer suit couldn't hide her nervous fidgeting, and Dad's normally perfect tie was slightly askew. "Sit down, please," I said, my voice professionally neutral. They sank into the chairs facing my desk, looking uncomfortably at the thick files laid out before me. "Amanda," Mom started, "surely we can discuss this as a family." "That's Chief Anderson or Dr. Anderson in this office," I corrected quietly. "And no, we cannot discuss this as a family. We're here to address serious professional violations that have put patient care at risk." Dad's face reddened. "Now listen here." "No, you listen," I interrupted, opening the first file. "Patient Harris, abandoned during post-operative recovery for a golf tournament. Patient Chen, rushed through pre-op consultation because you had theater tickets. Patient Williams, whose complications were missed because you left early for a wine tasting." I laid out photograph after photograph, document after document, text messages showing their cavalier attitudes toward patient care, nursing reports documenting their dismissive behavior, security footage of them leaving during critical care periods. And finally I continued, "Your own daughter, left alone for surgery while you hosted a beach party. A clear violation of hospital policy and medical ethics." "We're experienced surgeons," Dad protested weakly. "We understood the risks." "Did you?" I met his eyes steadily. "Because experienced surgeons should know that every patient deserves proper care and support, regardless of the procedure's routine nature. Experienced surgeons should understand that our duty to patients comes before social engagements." Mom's carefully maintained composure cracked slightly. "Amanda, Dr. Anderson, we never meant, your intentions are not relevant to this review," I cut in. "Your actions are, and those actions have demonstrated a pattern of putting personal convenience above patient care." I pulled out the final document, their rehabilitation plan. "Your surgical privileges will remain suspended for 30 days. During this time, you will complete comprehensive ethics training, participate in patient care workshops, and work under supervision in non-surgical roles." They stared at the document in shocked silence. "Additionally," I continued, "you will each perform 100 hours of service in the pediatric ward, the department you've so often dismissed as beneath your surgical expertise. Perhaps spending time with our youngest patients will remind you why we took our medical oath." 100 hours, Dad sputtered. "But our patients have been reassigned to other surgeons who understand the meaning of dedicated care," I finished. "This is non-negotiable. Sign the agreement, or the ethics board will proceed with licensing review recommendations." Their hands shook slightly as they signed. I watched them, these 2 brilliant surgeons, who had always made me feel small for choosing pediatric care over surgery, now humbled by the very principles of patient care they'd forgotten. "One more thing," I added as they stood to leave. The next time you're tempted to dismiss someone as just a nurse, or just working in pediatrics, remember this moment. Remember who documented your violations, who built this case, and who now holds your professional futures in their hands. They nodded silently, unable to meet my eyes. You're dismissed, I said quietly. Report to pediatrics tomorrow, at 7 a.m. The charge nurse will be expecting you. As they left my office, I saw their reflections in the window. Two stooped figures, so different from the proud surgeons who'd walked out of my pre-op room a week ago. The beach house stood empty now, their celebratory champagne glasses still unwashed in the sink. I turned back to my desk, where more files awaited review. There would be time later to process the personal aspects of this situation. For now I had a hospital to run, and patients who needed their chief of surgery to ensure they received the care they deserved. Sometimes the hardest lessons in medicine came from unexpected teachers, and sometimes the best way to uphold medical ethics was to make sure even the most experienced doctors remembered their first most sacred duty: do no harm.